I'll take that.
Sure.
So I love being introduced as an interventionist because we've all seen intervention, right? So we all know what goes on, right? Read the letter, the mother cries, the half-dead person goes to rehab, and then they become a therapist at their rehab. And so that's the narrative that we all like to hear about addiction, and it's true of about less than 1% of people who actually try to live an intoxicant-free life. So first of all, I love Brooklyn, right? We love Brooklyn. I grew up in California, and you've heard of Brooklyn. You knew somebody's grandmother was from there, but you didn't really know a lot about Brooklyn. And so when I actually landed here, I felt like I came home because, you know, in California, even smart people there are dumb, which is a big problem with the place. And so, you know, I was one of the more off-putting and abrasive people in California, so I didn't have a lot of choice but to come to Brooklyn. So that's where I ended up. A lot of the things I love about Brooklyn is the blunt honesty. I have this neighbor who's incapable of small talk. If I say, hey, how are you? She says, I'm terrible. I just had a CAT scan, but I don't want you to worry, which I think is great. And so here I am. I came to Brooklyn. Before I got to Brooklyn, by the time I was 25, I was severely depressed and alcoholic and doing that thing that a lot of alcoholics do, which is pour alcohol on depression, which seems like a good idea at the time. It's a lot like scratching a mosquito bite, where it's like, thank you, Jesus, for this scotch, where you feel so much better. And as it turns out, it was the absolute worst thing that you could have done. So by 25 years old, I was isolated, alone, alcoholic, and depressed. And then I lived that story, off to rehab, and if you hang out at rehab long enough, they'll let you be a therapist at the rehab. So that's pretty much how it went. I did return to school for a degree in clinical social work. I've had a big, huge range of experience in all areas of addiction treatment, detox, all kinds of stuff, grimy ones, where you're pulling needles out of people's arms that have been broken off, that kind of thing. And then I ended up at the Rehab to the Stars in Malibu, California, Promises. Perhaps you've heard of this place. Lindsay Lohan went there as a winning endorsement for rehab. Then I ended up back here in New York, and one of the things is that there's a pretty accepted modality about addiction treatment on the West Coast, and this is one of the things that they do really well, is that after rehab you go to a transitional phase of your treatment. And so when I came to New York City, there was no transitional, literally there was not one, what we call sober living, there was not one. If you've seen Sober House with Dr. Drew, that's the idea, although we try to do it a little more professionally than that. And so it became a situation where we needed to create it, because I couldn't imagine that in a city of 8 million people, that's the largest consumer of cocaine in the world, that there wasn't a need for a sober living in the city. So we ended up in Brooklyn for a lot of reasons. One, the diversity and the acceptance. We got no pushback in Brooklyn. In Manhattan, brokers wouldn't talk to us. They didn't want to know what we were doing. They wouldn't hear of it. And then as soon as we crossed the river, we got 7,000 square feet that we're able to house up to 14 people in, and that's sort of our clubhouse, is what it is. The core company is a consultation firm. We can consult on anything from crisis all the way through your first year of recovery. So treatment options, court cases. We do a lot of court advocacy for people with ridiculous felonies for dealing dime bags of pot, to guys trying to get custody or trying to get overnights with their unsupervised visitation, that kind of a thing. And so we do that right here in Williamsburg, which is great. I love Williamsburg, mostly because I love being the oldest and the fattest resident of any community, right? When I first came, it was like, I got to get a skateboard and an Asian girlfriend, I guess, and join a band. And here's the thing about social work school, and I think that a lot of people, first of all, it's heavily female. Whenever you have to role play, you role play the various scenarios, and it's always like, oh, the domestic violence. Okay, we need the perpetrator. Joe, come on up, be the perpetrator of the rape. And so it's written by women for women. And so it's a big, huge thing to kind of make it into something that can translate to a male population. So that's one of the things that I hope we do. And I know what I was talking about. One of the things that they really drill into you when you're in social work school is community organizing, and I personally took that to heart. I thought that that's a really important tenet of what we do as social workers, not just the individual. And they give this example that you will, as a social worker, you're going to pull people out of a ditch, for sure, but at some point you have to talk about the ditch that they're falling into. And so there are 20 million Americans who meet criteria for some kind of chemical use disorder. And there's another 20 million who identify themselves as in recovery from alcoholism, some range of chemical dependency, with 40 million Americans with this problem on their mind. And if we all only know a few people, that means that chemical dependency, alcoholism, whatever you want to call it, it's everybody's problem. Everybody's got a drunk uncle somewhere. Everybody has a teenage boy they're worried about. Everybody has something. And it impacts us in many different ways. That's how we started The Fix. Because as a community organizer, I can't talk to 40 million people. And so a really good friend of mine, Mayor Roshan, who started Radar, started a bunch of other publications, and we started thefix.com, which was supposed to be, the intention of The Fix was to start dialogue about the problem. The South American leadership complains incessantly that we don't talk about this problem in North America, that we fight wars, we incarcerate a significant portion of our population, but we do not talk about the problem of chemical dependency. In the last election, Mitt Romney had no drug policy, never mentioned it. Did make some snide remark to a guy who wanted medical marijuana. He had MS, gave him some dismissive thing. It's on YouTube, you can see it. But in an age where the political conversation is dominated by wasteful government spending, there is no more wasteful government spending than how we spend. Hi, I'm just waving my son. He's under the table there. Anyway, there is no more wasteful government spending than the drug war, than trying to, the way that alcoholism impacts the community. And so that was the intention of The Fix, and we tried to do it with a sense of humor. One of our first things that we did was we offered a contest to our readers, an over and under and when Justin Bieber would go to rehab, which was like, people were, you'd think you'd insulted the Virgin Mary or something. How dare you? Justin Bieber's a wonderful human. I think that a large part of the problem in our communities is not only that we don't talk about this problem, but that we are so deeply, deeply ashamed of this problem. The night that Whitney Houston died, Fox News called, "Will you comment?" Yes, I'll comment, sure. And they kept saying, "Don't say she was a drug addict. We don't know if she was a drug addict. So when you get on, don't say anything about the drugs." And I kept thinking, this just isn't translating in my world. If she had had stage 4 cancer and she died, I'm going to have the same empathy for her as I do that she died of an addictive disease. That this is a health problem. We're not going to incarcerate our way out of it. We're not going to punish our way out of it. There's no way. Not going to happen. Thanks. Yeah, go ahead. And as long as we're on that soapbox, there was a Good Samaritan bill in New Jersey that Governor Chris Christie vetoed. Basically, if you called 911 and somebody was overdosing, you could not be charged with any of the paraphernalia or the drugs that were in the house. Because what happens is somebody overdoses, people get scared, they don't call 911, and the person dies. By the way, overdoses kill more people in your age group than car accidents. So that's something to just kind of put it in context about what we're really talking about in terms of a public health crisis. So Governor Christie said, no, which is an odd choice for a man who's eating himself to death. You would think that he could somehow connect to addictive behaviors. But no, he could not. Google diabetes, Parkinson's, breast cancer. You have endless choices about information. Breast cancer, horrible disease, hope it gets eradicated. It does not impact the same number of people that addiction does. So why was there no voice in the media for people who are addled by addiction, looking for treatment, in recovery? We have no idea. So that's how we started thefix.com. It's been well received, it's finding a home, it's getting its voice. Mayor and I have since been forced out by the investor, which is a whole other story and a downside of entrepreneurship. And so it's really not nearly as good as it once was, is what I'm trying to say. All right, what else can we talk about here? The big question we get all the time about the recovery culture is it's all about AA, right? You say AA, what do you say? You don't have to respond. Hey guys, I'll go ahead. I'll take the hit. Yes, I'm in AA. I have been for many years. Haven't had a drink in 16 years, so we can end that suspense. You say AA, and people say, "Oh, my aunt's in that." Right? But it's this mysterious subculture that nobody knows what goes on there, and it holds the recovery hostage. It holds people hostage because they have that tenet of anonymity, which is actually secrecy. And so, as we have said many times, and we have tried to learn from the HIV community, and they learned right away that silence equals death with HIV, and it's the same with addiction. Silence equals death. And so we say it all the time. It's time for us to come out of the church basement, right? Intoxicant-free living has to be okay. It has to be okay. It has to be a viable choice for young people. It has to be an option that they know about. And it cannot be with the cultural paradigm of drudgery in AA in a church basement. Make no mistake, I love AA. I recommend AA. I go to AA. It can't be the solution for 40 million people. It just cannot. And so AA has become the Tea Party of recovery. It's faith-based. They believe they are the only solution. They're opposed to science. They oppose medication. And I guess that's the great irony is it's almost like the pro-life thing. Like, I am very pro-life on an individual level. If my girlfriend, who's sitting right here, is pregnant, and please, no, okay. If we're having a baby, that's just how it is. I couldn't do it. That's not public health policy. I get it. The world has to be pro-choice, and there have to be more options for people who are impaired by addiction than just AA. And it can be a wonderful experience. But the truth is, what we know about addictive disease is that it is stabilized by community and by experience, which is why I wanted to be a part of this event. You could go to church, you could join a club, you could coach Little League. What we know is that people who do not want to use their drug of choice any longer, if they're alone, they're vulnerable. So the key is to not be alone. And the key is to do something and do it with somebody. Some people can do that through AA. Other people cannot. So what can we do to change this culture? First of all, you can advocate for drug laws that make sense. That'd be the first thing. People in recovery don't organize. We don't advocate for our own. I sit in court a lot of days with clients. When there's a domestic violence case, the women from the domestic violence advocacy, they come in, they sit in the front row, they don't say a word, but they're there to support the person. When there's a ridiculous drug charge that's going to tag a young person with a felony for the rest of their life, there's no advocacy from the recovery community coming into the courtroom to sit there and just say, hey, we're here with you, and we're trying to work to do something about this and change that. We can medicalize addiction, right? That'd be a good idea. We've medicalized obesity. There's a surgery for that now. It's the gastric bypass. If it was the same thing, if we treated people with weight problems and obesity the same way that we treat people with addiction, what we would say to people with obesity is, you didn't pray. You should just scrub the toilet and die. You ate all those cheeseburgers. What's the matter with you? That's what we would say to people with obesity. But what we have done is we've come up with bariatric surgery and gastric bypass surgery, and all of the rates of things that go along with obesity, diabetes, heart disease, strokes, emphysema, those rates decline when there's a medical solution to that problem. What else? You know, I have this theory about taxation. We had for years, smoking's bad. Don't smoke. Smoking will kill you. What got rates of smoking down was taxation. When cigarettes became $15 a pack, people thought twice. They smoked less. They quit. They did those things. And we can do the same with alcohol. Governor Martin O'Malley, who's the governor of Maryland, raised taxes on alcohol in the state of Maryland from 6% to 9%. It was the first tax raise in 30 years. And in the first year, they made $85 million. It hurt no one. It's a non-essential item. It's not food. It's not gas. It's not heating oil. It's not diapers. Don't have to have it. If you don't like the tax, don't buy the product. It's that simple. $85 million, to me, if somebody gave me $85 million, there'd be treatment programs in prison, reentry programs for nonviolent offenders, legitimate programs in schools so that kids have an understanding of what alcoholism is, what it's not, and how it's impacting their life. Not the DARE program. The DARE program, giant waste of time and money. And so that was 1 year, $85 million. The $85 million went to the disability lobby because they asked for it. People in recovery, we don't have a lobby. We didn't ask for the $85 million, so we're not getting the $85 million. But one of the things that we do know is that through taxation, we could do a lot of things. In this state, New York State, would anybody have any idea how much a gallon of beer is taxed? 14 cents. There's a 14-cent tax on a gallon of beer. Anybody know any beer drinkers? What kind of damage can a gallon of beer do to your neighborhood? Right? Car accidents, people ending up in the emergency room, uninsured. Who pays for that? You do. Does the alcohol company pay for that? No. They get richer and richer and richer and richer. They are legitimized drug dealers, is what they are. 14 cents a gallon, and there's no pushback on the alcohol lobby. Spirits taxed $6.44 a gallon in the state of New York. Same thing, right? $6. One of the things that the organizers of this event told me, the notes I got was, don't be preachy. So I thought, okay, I'm not on any kind of mission to get people to not drink. I really don't care. And I'm not on a membership drive for people to join AA. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. If I could, there are people in AA that I would remove because, let me tell you, it's not a hotbed of mental health. That's for shit sure. So we're not looking to do that. The truth is that most people use alcohol appropriately. They don't have a problem. They're not impaired by it. So the culture of just say no and prohibition, it does not work. It doesn't work for our community. It doesn't work for Brooklyn, and it doesn't work anywhere else in the world. So what I suggest, what do I suggest? You know, I really don't know, to be quite honest with you. I've tried to organize a Million Addict March on Washington. That didn't go very far. We thought, okay, we'll sit in front of the White House like it's an AA meeting on metal folding chairs, right? Like we're in an AA meeting. We'll just sit there. We'll wait for them to come out and talk to us. You know, that didn't go anywhere either. We had a very brief conversation with Martin O'Malley's office about that plan, about raising the taxes on alcohol. What the feedback they gave us was, well, we'd have to have some education about recovery and alcoholism before we could. And I just thought, really, O'Malley, you need some education about alcoholism, do you? You have no idea about that? Okay. So there's a long way to go with this. Lots of reframing to be done. I hope the fix does something. I don't know what it does, but I hope it starts people talking, if nothing else. in terms of what we do here in Brooklyn, and in terms of, we can do, the phone calls we get are anything. Our son overdosed. We're at Lenox Hill Hospital. What do we do? That's one call. Our senior vice president came drunk to the meeting, to the board meeting again. What do we do about that? So those are a lot of the calls that we do, and that's kind of our revenue stream. We're very much interested in diversifying commerce and care. We are able to take a lot of pro bono cases. My favorite pro bono case is the single mother with the son that she can't handle. Just because I've been successful with that population. It's not anything else. You can yell at them. You can't offend them. The under 25-year-old male. So that's why we do that. And I think the other thing that we really need to do is we need to be present. We need to be public. We need to tell people what recovery is and what it's not. And what it is being 25, alone, depressed, alone, in a bar, drinking and not functioning in the world. That is alcoholism. And what recovery is lots of different things. People go on to school, they go to law school, they get married, they do whatever. My girlfriend and I, both in recovery, we went to Africa last week, 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago, because we're taking it's a long story. A kid is going to come to St. Francis Xavier, which is one of the boys' schools in Manhattan. 150-year history of educating bright boys. And so we're taking him. He's orphaned by the HIV crisis there, and he's going to come and live with me in Brooklyn and go to the school. And that's recovery. That's what it is. Because drunk and depressed people don't help HIV orphans. They don't. They don't participate in their communities. If you can get to a baseline of not destroying things, that's considered success, and that's not enough to ask from the recovery community. The holidays are upon us, right? We all know there's going to be a drunk person. Oh, thank you. There's going to be a drunk family member. There's going to be a fight, right? Mashed potatoes are going to fly. Something's going to happen. And for a lot of families, and so when that doesn't happen, people just think, okay, good. But that's not enough. Alcoholics are bright, dynamic people. They can do more. They can do more in the community, and they can participate in ways that nobody ever imagined. But not if we live in secrecy, and not if we're afraid, and not if we're... Just realize this giant bar, I've been basically advocating to tax them for this giant, right? But right, I mean, we could have a booze-free bowling night. Why not? And that's sort of the thing that I like to tell people. Do something without drinking. One day, see what your life is like. See what you're like without impairment of intoxicants. And I will also be honest about it. It's not easy. It's not a lot of fun. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of great stuff in it, but there are certain things where I constantly think, sure, you can do that. If I could get drunk, I could do that. But I can't. And so, how are we going to wind this up? I don't know. Anyone want to know? Anyone have an intervention they need to do? That's sort of the thing. I will say that my interventions never look like that. They always look like, we're plucking the person, we're driving them to rehab, and we're sort of hearing the story along the way. So what is good about that show, and I did do a show, I had a brief and glorious career with A&E. It was horrible. They were just a nightmare. It was this most absurd thing ever. But what's good about that is that I think that families understand that there is something that they can do. And there's something that we can all do. And what I hope is that you all give that some thought about taxing alcohol, write your congressman, and advocate for that. There you go. Thanks.